Chapter 212 Reward. No, there's no problem. Fang Qing shook his head and continued, it's the owner and his wife who are kind. Anyone else wouldn't have focused on teaching others who didn't have a slave contract. Chiao Yu grew up in the town, so he understood what he meant. For example, if an apprentice wanted to learn a craft from their master, they would have to work for 1 or 2 years for the master to affirm their character and make sure that they liked the craft before they were accepted. However, it would take a few years for the apprentice to learn any essential skills after joining. Although he would earn a small income at this time, festival gifts for his master must not be lacking. Therefore, before finishing an apprenticeship, they were basically doing free work for their masters. The main issue was that the master might not even teach all of their craftsmanship. There was also a clear difference between long-term workers and servants. Although long-term workers had quite a lot of freedom, they did the most challenging work, except for those with skills. The key was that servants could command and manage long-term workers under normal circumstances. Therefore, in general, the treatment of long-term workers wasn't as good as that of servants. However, servants had their difficulties too. First, they were contract-bound. Second, their lives were no longer in their hands. Of course, this was also the main reason why they could gain the complete trust of their master. Thinking of this, he fell into deep thought. What was he going to do? On the other end, Sun Hongliang also found Zhou and asked, Mistress, do you really intend to teach those children? That's right. They need to survive, and we need people. We each take what we need. Zhou nodded, then looked at him and said, but I'll have to trouble you to help me inspect them. Let's see who we can use and who we can't, and what the useful ones are good at. Understood. I will test them. Please do so. After that, Manager Lu came in with Zhou Huaiming, and Zhou immediately greeted them, saying, Brother Zhou, Uncle Lu, you're here. Come in and have a seat. You're willing to spend so much money just to get the temperature down here. From the outside, it seems like there are 2 different worlds. Zhou Huaiming sat down and waved his fan. That's because you're hot internally. Hurry up and sit down to rest. I'll go get you a glass of water. After Zhou finished speaking, she went to the kitchen. She got them a bowl of cold water, took 2 small bowls, and made them each a bowl of ice cream with crushed peaches. Is this the ice dessert Uncle Lu was talking about? Zhou Huaiming looked at the ice cream and asked in surprise. Yes, this is ice cream. Try it and see how it tastes. Zhou sat down too. Zhou Huaiming and Manager Lu didn't hesitate and drank a sip of the cold water before slowly eating the ice cream. After a mouthful, Zhou Huaiming's eyes lit up. Such softness, what is it made of? It's mainly cream, a cream made with egg white sugar, and milk. I see. This is a must-have for summer. 1 mouthful can already reduce my heat and fill me up. Zhou Huaiming exclaimed as he buried his head in his food. After he was done, he finished the rest of the cold water and said, Let's go to the backyard. I have something to tell you. Sure. Zhou responded and took them to the living room in the back courtyard. The child beggars who had been playing around immediately ran out. Zhou asked them to sit down and said, Brother Zhou, if you need anything, just tell me. Manager Lu did not take a seat. Instead, he went to the door to keep a lookout. This time, I'm not asking you for something but to give you something. After Zhou Hui finished speaking, he passed her 20,000 taels of silver and continued, This is the reward for the water wheel, given by the 3rd prince. Because of the Gu clan's special status and the first prince's interference, the water wheel invention was rewarded to the Qian clan's head. Chapter 213 Imperial Decree, the First Prince. Why is he doing this? Zhou looked at him in confusion. He was the one who brought up the evidence of the Gu family's crimes. The county governor and Elder Chiao were his people. What about Chao Lanqing? He is from the fourth prince's mother's family, Minister Su's family. Su Mingtang, the seventh son of the Su family, leaked the news to the first prince about the water wheel. The two princes are sure amazing. Even biological brothers can be divided into two factions. Zhou Ying laughed. Zhou Huiming heard the sarcasm in her words but didn't know how to reply. He took out another 10,000 taels of silver and said, "This is the money for the ice-making method. There's not much skill involved in making ice, so I won't accept this reward." Zhou Ying quickly pushed it back. But it's been helpful. Not only did it solve the ice problem in our restaurant but also elsewhere. Moreover, in the capital and other prosperous places, we can earn a lot of money just by selling ice, so I can't take this recipe for free. If you don't think it's too little, please take it. Zhou Huiming stuffed it into her hands after he finished speaking. Thank you. When Zhou Ying heard they would sell ice for money, she didn't hesitate anymore. You can continue with your day, as I still have to make a trip to the Qian clan's workshop. Zhou Huiming stood up and said, "May I know what reward the emperor has given the Qian clan?" Zhou Ying got up and asked curiously. Qian Zheqiang will be promoted to a 9th grade craftsman in the Ministry of Works. He will be responsible for the production and maintenance of the water wheel in our county. He will also be rewarded with 100 taels of silver. How petty. Ahem, you can't say this outside. Otherwise, if someone with ill intentions hears you, even the third prince won't be able to protect you. Zhou Huiming coughed. I want, Zhou Ying laughed dryly and nodded. After sending them out, she returned and kept the 30,000 taels of silver in her inner space before going to the kitchen to get busy. After leaving the restaurant, Zhou Huiming went to the village to announce the imperial decree as an imperial envoy, shocking the villagers. When they heard the contents of the imperial decree, they immediately exploded. Especially the people of the Gu clan. The drawing of the invention clearly belonged to Gu Qingrui and his wife. How could their reputation and rewards all fall to the Qian clan? How could they be willing to accept this? I can understand everyone's feelings. Their family has other arrangements, and this is the reward for the Qian clan. Besides, who in your Gu clan has the ability to build and repair water wheels? Zhou Huiming asked loudly. Everyone immediately became listless when they heard this. Among the younger generation, only Qian Zheqiang's woodworking skills were the best. The others weren't up to the task. Alright, you're all dismissed. Qian Zheqiang, remember to report to the county office tomorrow. Zhou Huiming said to Qian Zheqiang. Yes, this commoner will obey your orders. Not a commoner anymore. No matter what, you're an official now, so you'll have to change this form of address. The village chief corrected him. At the same time, the village chief was overjoyed. Even though Qian Zheqiang was only a 9th rank official, he was still a government officer. The Qian clan had finally found someone in the county government, which would be much more convenient for their future. But he didn't dare to laugh out to celebrate when he thought of the Gu family situation. Because of General Zhou's words, it was not hard to know that the Gu clan hadn't gained anything this time. However, when he thought about the Gu family's current status, he understood why. At most, the two clans would develop together in the future. The patriarch, Father Gu, and second Uncle Gu more or less understood what was going on. When they saw Zhou Huiming off, second Uncle Gu still asked unwillingly, General Zhou, is there someone who is purposefully pressing down our Gu family? Zhou Huiming hesitated for a moment, but he remembered they were quite familiar with the capital power struggle. He nodded and whispered, the one who's against your reward is the first prince's people. However, the one who leaked the news was the fourth prince's mother from the Su family. Chapter 214 Self-Reflection. What a fucking ingrate. Second Uncle Goo immediately exploded when he heard this. When they had been in the capital, they had taken good care of the fourth prince. The princess, in particular, had supported him. Second Uncle Goo hadn't expected that not only did they not receive the fourth price protection, but he had also turned around to suppress them. Second Uncle Goo was truly angry. However, before he could finish his sentence, Father Goo wrapped his arms around his neck and covered his mouth. Zhou Huaiming glared at him coldly. Be careful of what you say. Besides, isn't it your mistake that led you to be in this state? You should reflect on your actions. After he finished speaking, he got into the carriage. Thank you for your advice, General Zhou, Father Goo thanked hurriedly. However, Zhou Huaiming ignored them and asked the coachman to drive on. After the carriage had gone far away, the patriarch wiped the sweat from his forehead and raised his leg to kick Second Uncle Goo. You rascal, do you think your head is that sturdy? No, big brother. Second Uncle Goo staggered and was about to refute when the patriarch abruptly cut him off. Go to the ancestral hall and kneel for a day and a night. Reflect on your actions. Big brother, I'll bring him over now. Father Goo immediately pulled Second Uncle toward the ancestral hall. The village chief didn't know what to say after seeing this. It was not surprising for the Goo clan to experience what they did. Arg, I'm so pissed. I've never seen such a brainless person. The patriarch complained in an unpleasant tone. Don't be angry, anyone would feel uncomfortable. But don't worry, as long as I'm alive, our two clans will be tied together. Thank you, Uncle. You don't have to take this matter to heart. As General Zhou said, this reward can only fall on Jiaqiang, so I have no objections. At this point, the patriarch asked thoughtfully, Uncle, what do you think General Zhou meant when he said there would be other arrangements for the Goo clan? The village chief paused for a moment and nodded, saying, since the imperial decree did not mention it, it must be a private compensation. It should be directly given to Gu Qingrui and his wife. That's true. The drawing belongs to them, so naturally, they should receive the reward. The patriarch nodded in agreement. He turned to look at the remaining water at the bottom of the river not far away and sighed. People suffering from this drought are panicking. I hope the drought won't continue any longer. It's hard to say, but it's better than a flood. The village chief sighed. Fortunately, the village was not affected much because of the water wheel and the decision to plant only chilies. There were rumors that many families in other villages had already started to sell their children. At night, after Zhou Huaiming heard the report from Manager Lu and Sun Hongliang, he looked at Sun Hongliang and asked, what do you think of Zhou Ying and her husband? They are of good character. As long as their servants follow their rules, they're quite generous to them. Also, there's a couple in the restaurant with a child. Manager Zhou gave special permission for the child to go to school. She said that if the child can pass the exam 3 years later, she can give him his freedom. What if you were to follow them? Sun Hongliang was stunned for a moment, and then his face turned pale as he knelt. Young master, please let me know if I have done anything wrong. This little one will correct it immediately. What are you thinking? Didn't you just say that Zhou Ying and the others want to train some people? It's obvious that they have a long-term plan. Since she trusted you and asked you to help keep an eye on the beggars, I think it's better for you to go directly to her side. By then, she'll be able to trust and value you more. Who knows, you might even become their #1 aide in the future. However, it might not be as promising as the development prospects over here. Of course, I won't force you if you're not willing. Chapter 215 Choice. Sun Hongliang finally understood what was being implied. Zhou Huaiming wasn't unhappy with him but was just letting him choose a new master. He couldn't help but fall into deep thought. To be honest, both sides had advantages and disadvantages, depending on what kind of life he wanted. After hearing that, Manager Lu hoped he would choose Zhou Ying's side because life there was relatively more comfortable. With his help, Sun Hongliang's future days would be almost set. However, this matter concerned Sun Hongliang's future, so Manager Lu could not decide for him. After a while, Sun Hongliang raised his head and said, "General, I would like to go back and discuss it with my family." "That's fine. This is a major turning point in your life. You and your family should have a unified opinion." Zhou Huiming nodded in agreement. After the two left Zhou Huiming's study, Sun Hongliang immediately asked for Manager Liu's opinion. Manager Liu, on the other hand, did not respond directly. Instead, he analyzed the pros and cons for him. After Sun Hongliang heard this, he was slightly biased toward Zhou Ying because he didn't like the life of fighting and killing. In addition, after living a comfortable life for a few months, he suddenly dreamed of a relatively ordinary life. After returning, he didn't reveal his thoughts but asked for his family's opinion. Fortunately, they finally agreed for him to head over to Zhou Ying's side. The next morning, Sun Hongliang told his decisions to Zhou Huiming, and Zhou Huiming took him to Zhou Ying to complete the handover. Once everything was done, Zhou Huiming set off after another meal. Zhou Ying had handed over the matter of training the child beggars to Sun Hongliang and Gu Qingrui. Qiu Yu and the others also signed contracts to sell themselves as servants, with Sun Hongliang as an example. In the blink of an eye, it was already autumn, the season with the most rain. But there was still no rain. Refugees had begun to appear in the town, and the village had begun to form a patrol team because of the occasional thefts. Early in the morning, Zhou Ying and her husband were sleeping soundly when they suddenly heard a hurried knock on the door, followed by Zhuang's rabid dog. The two woke up one after another. Gu Qingrui heard the anxious voices outside and scrambled to his feet. "Babe, from the sound of it, something must have happened. You should get up quickly." Zhou Ying nodded unwillingly, then took some clothes and put them on. After Gu Qingrui put on his clothes, he immediately ran out and shouted, I'm coming, don't worry." "Boss, something big has happened." Chang Shun immediately shouted anxiously when he heard his voice. When Gu Qingrui heard Chang Shun's voice, he was stunned for a moment. He had assumed that something had occurred in the village, but he had not anticipated that it would be from the manor. "What happened, Chang Shun?" he asked. "The manor was robbed last night, and we lost 5 sheep and 2 cows. 2 of the people on duty were injured, and the rest are all unconscious." Chang Shun replied with a perturbed expression. This was his mistake. If he were to pay for it, he would go bankrupt. "Wait a moment, and I'll get the carriage." After Gu Qingrui finished speaking, he informed Zhou Ying, took the first aid box, and put it on the carriage. He rushed to the manor with Chang Shun. After Zhou Ying heard the situation, she frowned. It seemed that someone was targeting them, and there were many of them. Just thinking of this gave her a headache. She got up and tidied up the house. She took some soy milk and steamed buns from the inner space and hurried to the manor after breakfast. When they arrived at the manor, the 3 unconscious people had already woken up while Gu Qingrui was bandaging the 2 injured people. "Uncle Chang, do you know who did it, or did they leave any clues behind?" he asked Chang Shun. Chapter 216 Search. I don't know who did it, but they left footprints and carriage tracks. However, these tracks disappeared after they left the manor. Chang Shun led her to the back of the cowshed. As expected, there were some messy footprints and the tracks of 5 small carts. Seeing this, Zhou Ying walked around the nearby area. After confirming that the robbers had left the manor, she chased after them. However, these tracks didn't disappear after they left the manor. Instead, they had put on shoe covers. This meant it was at least a 10-person coordinated attack. They followed the blurry mark all the way to the town and finally found the abandoned house where they had stood when they were watching the fireworks. The house had been renovated, and there were many people living in it. When Zhou saw this, she and Changshan retreated to the side and asked the nearby residents. Only then did they know that a group of local ruffians had lived here before summer, and they often came out to rob others. Moreover, they had someone on their side in the local authorities. They were also fierce men, so the villagers didn't dare say anything. Many couldn't stand it and had already moved or sought refuge with relatives. When Changshan heard this, he knew that these people were not to be trifled with. He hurriedly asked Zhou, "Mistress, what should we do? If we don't get rid of these people, I'm afraid our village will never have a peaceful day after this. We can't take them by force and need to plan it out. Let's go back to the manor and set up some traps. We'll talk about the rest later." "Alright, then I'll go back first. Be careful." Changshan turned around and hurried back to the manor. Zhou turned around and returned to the restaurant. When she saw the child beggars occupying themselves, she smiled with relief. At the same time, she quickly remembered the reason why they had moved here. It was because someone was always stealing their food. "Qiuyu," she called for Qiuyu. "I remember you saying that someone was always taking away your food. Do you know who they are and where they live?" "Yes, they're refugees. They live in that broken house in the southwest corner of the town." Qiuyu then asked curiously, "Mistress, why are you suddenly asking about this? Let's just let them be. They have more people than us, so let's not provoke them." "Do you know how many people they have?" "Mistress," Qiuyu urged. "Don't worry, I won't act rashly. I don't know. They're always with 7 or 8 men when I see them." "Alright, you can go." Zhou entered her residence, and Gu Qingrui rushed over just as she sat down. Zhou asked someone to cook him a bowl of noodles. After he finished eating, she asked, "How are their injuries?" "It's just an outside wound. They'll be fine after a few days of rest." "Uncle Chang also told me about that group of people," Gu Qingrui continued, "so don't worry about it. I'll think of a way to solve it." "How are you going to do it?" "They have people in positions of authority. We have to find sufficient evidence." "Don't worry, I won't mess around. Just take good care of the restaurant." After Gu Qingrui finished speaking, he turned around and left the restaurant. He found a person introduced by Qian Zhuang. The person was Li Si, and Gu Qingrui asked him to help find out where the beef stall was in town. At noon, Li Si told him that Butcher Zhang had beef and sheep, but they were all sent to prominent families and unavailable for sale. After receiving the news, Gu Qingrui only mumbled a few words of pity and paid him 100 coppers. Afterward, he took out a large bag of laxatives that he had concocted and headed toward Butcher Zhang's house. Chapter 217 Framing 1. When he arrived, there was a group of people eating in the share house. Besides the blood on the ground, 3 carts of meat were in the shed. After Gu Qingrui confirmed that there were no dogs inside, he turned around and flipped over the wall. He sprinkled the laxative on all the meat evenly and massaged the meat along the horizontal strips so the medicine could quickly penetrate. This way, even washing would only remove a portion of it, and the remainder would be more than enough for those to suffer from diarrhea. But this was enough. He just wanted to see who the person behind these ruffians was. When the time came, he would skin them alive. Of course, if they were to eat it without thoroughly washing it, they could only blame their bad luck. After he was done, he quickly returned to the restaurant for lunch. "Babe," Gu Qingrui said after the meal, "I'll be sleeping at the clinic tonight. You don't have to go back." "Alright. Bring some saltpeter with you when you leave." "No need, there's still some there." Gu Qingrui returned to the clinic in a good mood after that. Zhou couldn't help but be curious. It seemed that he must have done something terrible. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to smile after losing so much livestock. However, she didn't ask. If it were necessary, he would definitely tell her. In the evening, Gu Qingrui finished his meal and helped the apprentice grind the medicine while waiting for his patients to come. Sure enough, just as the sky turned dark, a person dressed as a maidservant rushed in and shouted while panting, "Dr. Luo, is Dr. Luo in? There's an emergency." "What's the matter, young lady?" "Dr. Luo has returned home today, and am on duty." Gu Qingrui stood up and said. "Then let's hurry up. Something has happened at Constable Tian's house. Many people have vomited and had diarrhea. They've all had food poisoning. Wait a moment, and they'll get the first aid kit." After Gu Qingrui finished speaking, he turned around and entered the clinic to get his first aid kit. He then followed her to the Tian family's house. When they arrived at the Tian family, they knew they ate hot pot mutton without cooking the meat thoroughly, so everyone was done in. Among them were the old grandpa and old lady of the Tian family, who had just come from the countryside to celebrate the Mid-Autumn Festival, as well as his two younger brothers and another large family. Tian Jingzhong, who had just put on his pants, had his eyes light up when he saw him. "Dr. Gu, you're here. Please take a look at my parents and children. They're about to collapse. Do you all have the same symptoms?" "Yeah, it's mainly diarrhea, but my parents and children are nauseated." "Don't worry. I'll go over and take a look." Gu Qingrui walked into the house after he finished speaking. However, as soon as he entered the house, the pungent smell almost made him vomit. He quickly held his breath and opened all the doors and windows. He walked to Father Tian's side and said, "Uncle Tian, please stretch out your hand. I'll take your pulse." "Sigh, hurry up. I can't hold on for long." As soon as Father Tian finished speaking, his stomach began to growl. Father Tian's face turned red, but he still reached out his hand. Seeing this, Gu Qingrui immediately checked his pulse. After checking his left hand, he checked his right hand as well. He finally asked, "Did you guys eat seafood? Crabs?" Otherwise, with the amount of medicine he had spiked, it wouldn't have become this serious. Yes. We are having a family reunion. Since the autumn weather is dry and we are getting heaty, I bought some crabs and prawns to eat." Tian Jingzhong nodded repeatedly. To be honest, although he had heard that Gu Shengru's medical skills were good, he didn't really believe in him because he was too young. He didn't expect him to really have some skills. Chapter 218 Framing 2, but I've eaten crabs a lot in the past, and this has never happened. Father Tian was full of doubts, and he ran out in a hurry. "Can I see what you guys ate tonight?" Gu Qingrui looked at Tian Jingzhong and asked. "Bring Dr. Gu over." Tian Jingzhong turned his head and spoke to the maidservant. The maidservant responded and brought Gu Qingrui to the dining room. Other than crabs, there was nothing else out of the ordinary. After that, he checked them one by one, especially the hot pot soup base. He didn't want to cause trouble for the restaurant. Finally, he looked at the beef and mutton. He pointed to some loose meat strips and asked the maidservant, "Where did you buy this beef and this mutton? The meat doesn't look very fresh." "I don't know either." The servant shook her head. "It can't be. I heard that this was fresh meat that had just been slaughtered." Tian Jingzhong followed over and said. Gu Qingrui did not reply. Instead, he passed the meat to him for him to see. Tian Jingzhong could tell at a glance that the meat was much looser than normal. He gave it another careful sniff. He didn't know if it was a psychological reason, but he sensed that the meat didn't smell fresh, and his face immediately darkened. Seeing this, Gu Qingrui said, to put it bluntly, it's just a case of food poisoning. I'll prescribe something, and everyone has to drink a bowl. Once the things in your stomach are cleared, you'll be fine. Then I'll have to trouble Brother Gu to give me a prescription. Gu Qingrui nodded and opened a prescription. He handed it to the maidservant and said, count how many people in the residence are sick. The adults can have one portion of each, and the children under 10 can have half. The servant took it and ran down with Tian Jingshong's special permission. Gu Qingrui was about to take his leave. Mr. Tian, do rest while I take my leave. Oh, please stay. It won't be too late to leave after my family's condition has stabilized. It'll save us the trouble of going back and forth. That's fine too. After that, Gu Qingrui went to the front yard to wait. About 2 hours later, their family's young and strong members had already recovered. 4 hours later, the elderly and children had also stabilized. Gu Qingrui once again took his leave. This time, Tian Jingzhong did not stop him. Instead, he gave him 5 taels of medical fees and personally sent him out. I really have to thank you for today, Brother Gu. You're welcome, this is what I should do. Gu Qingrui paused and continued, by the way, remember to eat blander food during the next 2 days, especially for the elderly and children. It's to recover your stomach. Gu Qingrui cupped his hands and returned to the clinic. However, he quickly went to see another patient. Naturally, he once again questioned the beef and mutton. That night, 7 or 8 families in town and even more across the county became ill with food poisoning. Even the county governor's house, by Jingping, was in a mess for the whole night. However, other than the families that Gu Qingrui had visited personally, the other families suffered. They had to suffer for half a day just to determine the cause of the illness. Therefore, everyone who had been plagued by this immediately started investigating. The culprit was quickly identified because this group consisted of either wealthy merchants or people in positions of authority. Gu Qingrui didn't expect that the real culprit was the brother-in-law of the county governor, a good-for-nothing wealthy brat. The reason was simple. After being despised by his father, he wanted to take advantage of the drought to make money. So, he organized a group of ruffians to rob the various villages and exchange them for money. After that, he sent people to various villages to take in children and sell them. Some of the girls were even sold into brothels. Basically, he did a ton of terrible deeds. Furthermore, his operations had spread throughout the entire county. When Bai Jingping received the news, he fainted from anger. When his wife saw this, she said she would no longer care about her brother either. Chapter 219 Consequences. The final result was that he was sentenced to death and executed immediately. As for his subordinates, some were exiled, some were sent to the mines, and some were arranged to build roads. In short, none were allowed to go free. Later, Bai Jingping took the blame and wanted to resign, but County Mayor Kong did not accept it. Instead, he made him responsible for public security. Bai Jingping became ruthless after this incident and adopted a strict crackdown strategy. For example, if you stole a chicken, you would be fined 10 taels of silver, beaten 50 times, and paraded in the streets for 3 days. The entire county finally quieted down. At the same time, Zhouying took advantage of the Mid-Autumn Festival to make and sell a batch of mooncakes, earning nearly 2,000 silver. However, the following autumn harvest was miserable. Crops near the river could be harvested, but not those further away. Zhouying had grown 2 seasons' worth of white sweet potatoes, and the manor had also harvested nearly 100 acres of white sweet potatoes. As for the potato vines, they were all collected and turned into feed for the cattle and sheep. Fortunately, the taxes were waived after the autumn harvest, and the county organized many strong labor forces to repair all the riverbanks so that people could survive the winter. In the winter, all kinds of bean sprouts became the main dish because there were no radishes or cabbages. However, their price was high because of the limited number of beans. Seeing this, Shoing took the opportunity to launch green garlic and yellow garlic, which made a lot of money again, but the business was still worse than last year. The only thing worth celebrating was that Tianjiawang and Cheonyang had come together. For this reason, Shoing bought a courtyard nearby and arranged for the couple, Choyu, and the others to live there. After that, the new year passed in a lukewarm manner. After the new year, there was heavy snow, which made people finally cheer. After the snow melted, the spring plowing began. That day, Gu Qingrui and Zhouing had just returned home when the patriarch and village chief came to find them. "Grandpa village chief, uncle, what's the matter?" Gu Qingrui asked. "Yeah, we have some serious business to discuss with you guys," the patriarch said. "Then please come in. Since we have nothing to do today, Ing can cook a few dishes, and we'll have a drink," Gu Qingrui said. "Yes, you guys sit down first. The food will be ready in a while." Zhouing greeted them and turned around to the kitchen. She first made them a pot of tea before starting to cook. However, now was not the time to show off. Therefore, Zhouing only made 4 home-cooked dishes. Twice-cooked pork, pan-pasted tofu, vinegar-fried bean sprouts, and fried peanuts. After serving it, she made zhajiangmian for herself, took out a cucumber from her inner space, washed it, and ate it together with her noodles. On the other end, after the 3 of them had a drink, the village chief asked, "Qingrui, does your restaurant still accept chili this year?" "Yes, I was just about to tell you about this. We're planning to plant the seedlings now that the snow has melted. I wonder how many plants the village is deciding to plant," Gu Qingrui asked. "I don't dare plant wheat this year, so I plan to plant a lot of chilies." The village chief said it with a heavy heart. But there must be a limit. After all, grain is the foundation of our food. The price of grain outside has increased a lot, Gu Qingrui said. "Everyone knows that, but what can we grow now? We can only grow vegetables. We can only harvest and grow autumn grain after the rainy season. I do have something here. It's a plant we found in the mountains 2 years ago. Although it doesn't fill you like grain, it can be eaten as a staple. The key is that the tender leaves can also be eaten, which is very suitable for the current lack of food and vegetables." "What is it?" The village chief's eyes lit up. The patriarch immediately perked up his ears. He quickly remembered the grass-like thing they had planted in their backyard last year and asked, "Is it the one you planted in the backyard for 2 seasons last year?" Chapter 220 Promoting White Sweet Potato. Yes, that's it. It grows underground like a yam, and the yield is quite high. If we plant it, we won't have to worry about not having food to eat. Gu Qingrui stood up and said. "Wait a moment, I'll go get one for you to see," he said. Afterward, he went to the kitchen and asked Zhouing for a white potato. After washing it, he took a knife back to the central room and said, "It's this. You guys can try it." When the village chief saw the white lump in his hand, he exclaimed in surprise, "This is really big. How many can one plant bear?" 3 to 8 or 9, all of different sizes. So many. How high is the yield? The patriarch was shocked. According to what he said, that plant would probably bear 2 to 10 pounds of white sweet potatoes. It's quite a lot. When we planted it last spring, the yield per acre was just under 10,000 pounds. When we planted it again in summer, the water supply couldn't keep up, so the yield was less than 2,000 pounds. That's not a small amount. 1 acre of land can only produce 100 pounds of wheat. If this is successful, it will be much more meritorious than the water wheel. The village chief was overjoyed. How many seeds do you have? He asked. I know how valuable it is, so I didn't dare waste a single one except for tasting. All in all, we have about 220,000 pounds. However, I can't give them all out. I still have to plant some in the manor. This plant is robust and tenacious. After the leaves grew out, they could grow roots by themselves. So, after planting it for about a month, you could cut the leaves and replant them again. But it could also be because of this that the yield of the second replant will be lower. That's still pretty good. After the village chief finished speaking, he quickly put it on the table and said, Quick, cut it open, and let us taste it. Gu Qingrui nodded and cut it open with a knife, letting them each eat a piece. To be honest, it's a bit bland, but there's no weird taste. It's better than yam, the village chief said after he finished eating. Indeed, but will there be any problems with eating this? The patriarch nodded in agreement. I tested it last year. Eating it on its own for long periods of time will cause symptoms such as bloating and acid reflux, but it is never poisonous. As long as we eat it with a reasonable amount of grain, it will become the main staple. Good, good. That's good enough. As for what you said, it's not worth mentioning compared to filling your stomach. The village chief said. Indeed, we'll have acid reflux if we starve anyway. As for bloating, to be honest, it's nothing to us farmers. We just need to run 2 more laps in the fields. Then it's decided. This year, we'll plant 1 or 2 acres of these white potatoes for each family. No matter what, we won't let the villagers starve to death. As for what to plant for the rest, let them arrange it themselves. The village chief nodded. Okay, I'll arrange for the seedlings to be grown in the next 2 days. Double the size of the chilies. If anyone else wants to grow them, they can come to us to get their seeds, just like last year. Yes, yes. We can also plant some vegetables that grow quickly. With that income, we can buy some food to last for a while. After that, the 3 of them happily drank some alcohol and then left. In the interspace, Zhouing prepared the seeds of rapeseed, spinach, chrysanthemum, cucumber, and cumin. Of course, cumin was the most abundant. This way, she wouldn't have to buy them at a high price in the future. The next day, after Zhouing handed the seeds to the patriarch, she went to the manor after she finished her work in the restaurant. In addition to growing seedlings, she planned to plant sweet potatoes in the manor and the grassland. This way, the people and the livestock could eat their fill. Chapter 221 Happy news. After the seedlings were planted, no one expected that the county would distribute some wheat seeds as assistance. However, there weren't many, only enough to plant half the land. But this was already enough to make the people happy. Therefore, just in case, the paddy fields near the river were all changed to dry land and planted with spring wheat. Zhouing didn't change her plan. She still intended to plant white sweet potatoes throughout the manor. A month later, people began to get their income back from the fields because the vegetables matured, and smiles appeared on their faces again. One day, Zhouing returned to the village early because she was having her period, which was unpleasant. On the way, they just happened to meet Madame Qiao walking outside, so she had to go up and greet her. Grandma, are you taking a walk? Yeah, are you not busy at the restaurant today? Madame Qiao greeted her back with a smile. Not really. It's hot now, so there aren't many people eating hot pot. I see. I have something to discuss with you. What's the matter? Just tell me, and I'll do my best if I can. It's not a big deal. I'm just here to inform you about your 4th sister-in-law, Gu Ziqia's marriage. People will be coming for the engagement the day after tomorrow, so I hope you can take the time to come over and have a look. This is excellent news. What kind of family is the groom from? Your eldest uncle's sister-in-law, Chen Zhen, introduced him to me. He's a well-off small landlord. There are 2 brothers in the family, and they own more than 100 acres of land. She's marrying into the second son of this family. That's good enough. Well, definitely be there the day after tomorrow. All right, then you go ahead. Well, Madame Chiao hadn't finished her words when she saw 2 carriages slowly enter the village. The 2 immediately stood to one side. After the carriage passed, Madame Chiao said, "I'm mostly sure that's your eldest sister-in-law that has returned." "Big sister? Are you talking about Sister Zi?" "Yes, I remember the coachman in front. He was the one who drove the carriage when we came back 2 years ago." "Your memory's pretty good, I can't even remember it was him." "You've been busy, after all." "I've been wandering around the village every day when I'm free, so I naturally remember it clearly." When Madame Chiao said this, she was a bit worried because their return was too low-key. However, she didn't care about that now. She shook her head and told Zhouing to come early the day after tomorrow, then went home. Zhouing didn't overthink, and when she got home, she went to her inner space to boil water with an electric kettle. She mixed it with mineral water and made herself a glass of milk. After drinking her fill, she laid on the heated bed for a nap. She fell asleep quickly and was woken up by Gu Qingrui after that. When she saw that the sky had completely darkened outside, she quickly got up and asked, "When did you come back?" "It's been a while." "Dinner is ready, so wash your hands and get up to eat." "Thanks." Zhouing sat up and calmed herself down. She went to her interspace to relieve herself before coming out for dinner. After the meal, Zhouing told him about Gu Ziqia's engagement. "It's the day after tomorrow. Remember to make time to go over earlier so that they won't complain." "All right." "Should we prepare something?" "There's no need. She's getting engaged, not married." "At most, we'll give them some peanuts and melon seeds." "That's true. You just have to prepare as you see fit." After Gu Qingrui finished speaking, he cleared the dishes and went to the kitchen to wash them. Gu Qingrui had just left when the curtain was lifted. Zhouing thought Gu Qingrui had returned, but it was Mrs. Wang and Gu Zi instead. Although Gu Zi was no longer haggard, her expression was dark, and her eyes were hollow. It seemed that something had happened again. "Auntie, sister, quickly come in and sit," Zhouing said after a brief moment of stunned silence. Chapter 222 Separation. Zhouing invited them to sit down and asked, "What would you like to drink?" "I'll go prepare." "Anything as you see fit, we'll have anything." Mrs. Wang replied absent-mindedly. "Sure, please wait a moment." Zhouing turned around and went to the kitchen to prepare a pot of chrysanthemum tea for them. She also called for Gu Qingrui. After exchanging a few polite greetings, Gu Qingrui sat down and asked, "How's big sister's health? Is she feeling better?" "Sorry for troubling you, but I'm fine now." Gu Zi nodded and replied expressionlessly. Seeing this, Mrs. Wang immediately wiped away her tears. Zhouing was shocked and quickly asked, "Auntie, why are you crying? Just tell us what you need. We'll definitely help you if we can." "I'm crying about how I was blind back then to have found such a bastard for your sister," Mrs. Wang said as she burst into tears. "Mother, this isn't your fault. This is just my fate." Gu Zi comforted her. Gu Qingrui was stunned. "Did eldest brother-in-law do something wrong?" he asked. "You don't have a brother-in-law anymore. We're divorced." Gu Zi immediately turned her head and chided him. When Mrs. Wang heard this, she immediately patted her hand and said, "How can you speak to Qingrui like that? You shouldn't take your anger out on him. I just don't want to talk about that bastard anymore." "What about the child? Did you bring them back?" Zhouing asked. I've brought them back. From now on, Juan and Lele will live with me. I'm here to ask you to introduce me to a broker. I want to buy a house, 2 shops, and some land in town as soon as possible. But it's not a good year for running a business. You can buy a house, but I think you should wait a while to buy shops and land. Showing advised. It hadn't rained since the last heavy snow, and the water level in the river is almost at the bottom. It was really not worth it to buy any land now. Yes. Please help me persuade your sister. I want her to build a house in the village so we can take care of her. Otherwise, I'm really worried about her living alone in town with 2 little girls. Mother, don't mention this again. I won't live in the village. Guzi frowned. Is it because of your dignity? Gu Qingrui asked. It doesn't look good. Guzi paused for a moment before she nodded. But can you avoid it for the rest of your life? That's right. You are divorced, but we look down on you just because of that. Why do you have to move out? Mrs. Wang asked in confusion. But we have another sister-in-law at home, and our second brother will be getting married in a month. I don't want to mess up his marriage. Didn't your father and brother say that if their family gives up on the marriage because of this, then it's fine if the marriage doesn't happen? Mrs. Wang said hurriedly. After that, she looked at Zhou and her husband and quickly gave them a look. She was asking them to help persuade Guzi. Sister, do you know about the elder sister of the Tian family next door? She's also divorced, and now she's living with her 2 daughters at her mother's old house. The villagers rarely gossip about them. Instead, they would claim that Brother Tian was caring and righteous in looking after them. These 2 years, through our untiring efforts, they've been living quite well. 2 days ago, someone even came to propose marriage. Zhou explained. That's right, Z, the people in our village are good people. Mrs. Wang echoed. Big sister, do you know what the situation was like when we first returned to the village? At that time, we were tied up and escorted back to the village. We were in a much worse state than you are now. In addition, we implicated the Gu clan. At that time, all of them were so pissed. But in the end, didn't we survive and integrate into the village? That's why the people in our village are quite kind. As long as you're not afraid and face it bravely, there's nothing that can't be solved. Gu Qingrui ended. Chapter 223 Buying a House 1. However, Guzi did not listen to him at all. She only felt it was embarrassing that she had divorced and wanted to find a place to stay as soon as possible. I just want to hurry up and find a house. We need a place to stay, she insisted. Zhou saw that she was determined and did not try to persuade her anymore. Sure. Let's buy you a house to live in first. As for the shop and the land, it's better to take your time. Seeing this, Mrs. Wang could only wipe her tears and knew she was out of options. All right, then I'll buy a house first. I'll come and find you tomorrow. Guzi nodded. After a few polite words, the mother and daughter left. After sending them off, Zhou and Gu Qingrui suddenly became silent. Guzi had changed so much that she must have been greatly affected. He just did not know what had happened to torture a woman to the point of paranoia. However, the 2 didn't have the habit of being nosy, so they quickly continued with their tasks. The next afternoon, Guzi came over with her eldest daughter, Juan. Sister-in-law, thank you for bringing us around. There's a carriage outside. No worries, it's just a small favor. Zhou informed son Lianghong about her going out, then turned around and got into the carriage with them. Zhou took the mother and daughter to the town's largest property agency. She greeted as she approached Manager Qian. Uncle Qian, business is here. Manager Zhou. Please come in. Manager Qian, who was lying on the lounge chair with his eyes closed, immediately came up to them when he heard that there was business. Your life is sure to be one of leisure. Zhou then introduced them to each other. Manager Qian turned to Guzi and greeted her. Oh, it's Miss Gu. May I know what kind of house you want to buy? If he remembered correctly, she was married to a scholar. He was confused as to why she was buying a house here. A house that can sleep 5 or 6 people and is safe in its surroundings, Guzi stated after some thought. That means houses in the east and north sections. Wait a moment, and I'll take a look. Manager Qian picked up the book on the table and flipped through it. Based on his memory, he pointed out 2 houses and said, one is near the academy. It's a house returned by a scholar who passed the exam. There are 3 main rooms and 2 east and west side rooms. There is another house not far away, where a merchant once used it to house his mistress. There are 5 main rooms and 3 rooms in the east wing. Many merchants stay in the surrounding area, and every family has a guard. Mistress. Guzi's expression turned ugly. Manager Qian could tell she was disgusted by the word mistress. He coughed dryly and continued, although she's a mistress, she's more of a concubine. It's just that she seems to have a bad relationship with the main family. He was interrupted by Guzi halfway through his sentence. Is there anything else? These 2 are the most suitable for you, but there are also 2 bigger ones. One is a small courtyard with 2 entrances and a total of 11 rooms. It was owned by a wealthy family that moved away. The house was just renovated 5 or 6 years ago, and it's pretty new. There's another one in the southern area, similar to this one, but closer to the pier. Then let's take a look at the small courtyard with 2 entrances. Guzi spoke after thinking for a moment. Sure, please wait a moment. I'll get the keys. Manager Qian left for the keys and called his wife out. Zhou said a few polite words to her and then went to the small courtyard with Manager Qian. After entering, there was a row of 4 rooms before them. The main living room was near the second entrance of the courtyard, which was built with 2 side rooms. In addition, there were 2 smaller rooms, each in the east and west wings. There was also a small garden in the middle. The courtyard was square and clean, looking fresh and new as a bonus. Chapter 224 Buying a House. 2. Guzi took a fancy to it at first glance, but she worried it was too expensive. She could only ask, how much is Manager Qian asking for this place? 300 taels. To be honest, this price is really not high. If it were in the past, it would not have been possible to get it without 500 taels. 300 taels. Guzi hesitated for a moment before she thought of the furniture in the house. What about the furniture inside? If you don't mind, you can have it. These are all items that come with the house. Guzi looked at Zhou because she knew little about the housing market. Uncle Qian, it's not easy for anyone during this disaster. Can you help me lower the price? I'll treat you to a big meal later. Zhou had no choice but to speak up. To be honest, I was really giving my lowest price because of our friendship. Think about it. This tile and brick house would cost about 150 taels of silver just to build it. In addition to the land, there is really no room for more discounts. Manager Qian shook his head without the slightest hesitation. Seeing this, Zhou knew that there was no room for negotiation. She turned her head and looked at Guzi. Guzi hesitated for a moment and walked around the house again. After confirming that there was still water in the courtyard well, she finally nodded. I will go with this. Don't you want to look at the others? Zhou asked. No, I'll take it. It's quiet here. Guzi shook her head. Soon after, Manager Qian went to find the owner, and the two sides quickly transferred the ownership. As for the broker's fee, it was paid by the seller. In the end, Zhou treated them to a meal at the restaurant. However, after the meal, Gu Zi insisted on paying the bill before leaving. The following day, the couple first went to town to deal with their things, then prepared some dried fruits and candies before returning to the village. Coincidentally, they bumped into Gu Zi, who was moving out. The two went up to greet her and then went their separate ways. When they arrived at the Gu family mansion, the couple heaved a sigh of relief when they saw that the groom's side of the family hadn't arrived. They passed the things they had prepared to Madame Chiao. "Grandma, we're here." All right. Come, have a seat. Did I bother your business?" Madame Chiao took the food with a smile and put it on the table. She called Gu Ziqiu over. "These are some snacks that your third brother prepared. Go and find a plate to put them on. When the groom's family comes later, make sure to treat him well." "Thank you, third brother and third sister-in-law." Gu Ziqiu took the things and ran away while blushing. "Oh, look at her, she's still blushing at this age." With a smile, Madame Chiao said. "Grandma, have you met the young man before?" Zhou asked. "I have, and he's quite a spirited young man. He knows some martial arts, and you'll definitely like him." Just as she finished speaking, Mrs. Liu and Mrs. Yao rushed back, each of them carrying many things in their arms. Gu Qingxi followed behind with a large rooster in his hand. When he saw the couple, he immediately put down the chicken and ran in. "Qingrui, sister-in-law, you're early. Did you go to town early in the morning?" "Yes, I bought some things for the banquet." At this point, Gu Qingxi pulled Gu Qingrui along and said, "Brother, let's go and slaughter the chicken together." "So you came to find me to work?" Gu Qingrui glared at him, but he still got up and went out. "Oh, right. Grandma, where's father and second uncle? Are they not at home?" Zhou asked. They went to the fields as it was time to prune the chili buds. They couldn't afford to hire workers, so the four of them went by themselves. Madame Chiao continued with a smile, "It's all thanks to you for the past 2 years. Otherwise, we wouldn't even have enough to eat." Chapter 225 Engagement 1. You're too kind, Grandma. It's just a win-win situation. However, it seems things aren't looking good this year, and we'll have to find a way to store more food. That's true. We've dried the remaining rapeseed and cabbage left over from last season. Oh right, we are also planning to sun-dry some white potatoes. If you two don't have enough food to eat, just come and take some, we have plenty at home. Sure, I won't be polite when we really need it. Zhou smiled and nodded. Gu Ziqiu quickly brought out a plate of dried fruits as the two chatted. Just then, Father Gu and the others returned home with the groom's family. Madame Chiao immediately got up and went out to welcome them with Zhou. As for Gu Ziqiu, she hid herself in the inner room. Soon, a woman dressed in gaudy clothes walked in with a smile. Behind her were a middle-aged couple, a young couple, and a young man. Zhou didn't even need to guess to know that the young man was Gu Ziqiu's fiancé, Zhang Xiaoshan. He had thick eyebrows, big eyes, and looked quite decent. He wasn't short, but he was a little shy, as he blushed when meeting them for the first time. Zhou followed Madame Chiao and politely greeted the other party. When Madame Chiao invited them into the house, Zhou turned around and went to the kitchen. It just happened that Mrs. Yao had also finished making tea and went into the room with Mrs. Liu to receive the guests. Mrs. Sun asked Zhou with a curious look, what do you think of that Zhang Xiaoshan? Mrs. Gu Ziqiu, and Gu Qingrui, who were slaughtering the chicken, immediately looked over. He doesn't look bad but blushes a lot, Zhou replied. Blushing? It seems that he's still an innocent young man. Not bad, Gu Qingrui quipped. Qingrui, what do you mean by innocent? Gu Qingxi asked in confusion. It means he's still a young man with no experience. Qingrui, don't lead Qingxi astray. He's still young, Mrs. Sun hurriedly reminded him. Auntie Sun, what are you saying? Am I a bad person? Besides, he's studying medicine now, so there are some things that he has to be taught. He can't hide from it. I think it's better to know these things earlier on. If we tell him and let him understand these things now, he won't be so impulsive in the future. Alright, then I'll leave you to teach him this. Help me look after him, Mrs. Sun said with a red face. What are you guys talking about? Gu Qingxi was confused by their conversation and asked curiously. It's about things between men and women, Gu Qingrui looked up and said with a faint smile. Gu Qingxi's face immediately turned red like a monkey's, but when he heard that, he just looked at his older brother blankly and did not know what to say. You're cute. I'll give you a biology class later. Gu Qingrui laughed. Ahem. Zhou looked at Gu Zichong, who was also blushing like a monkey's butt. She coughed and quickly changed the topic. By the way, has second brother's marriage not been settled yet? No, he's stuck in limbo, unable to shoot for a high target, and unwilling to settle with a lower-class girl. Even the matchmaker isn't willing to help him out now. Mrs. Guo shook her head. Maybe it's not fate yet, Mrs. Sun replied with a dry smile. After that, they saw Gu Chengxi's son, Gu Jiahao. He was a chubby little boy with the nickname Shao Jia, and he was stumbling around in the courtyard. Mrs. Sun turned her head to look at Zhou and asked, Look at Shao Jia. He can even walk now. When are you going to have a child? That's right. You two married just half a year later than the eldest son of our family. You two shouldn't be too far behind in bearing a child, Mrs. Guo echoed. We're not in a hurry. Let's wait until this drought is over. Gu Qingrui paused for a moment before replying. He took a deep look at Zhou. Don't they want it? Of course, they do, and they really want one. Chapter 226 Engagement 2, but their current bodies didn't allow them to have children. They had to wait for Zhou Ying's body to mature completely, as Gu Qingrui didn't want to ruin her body just for the sake of giving birth. Another thing was the problem with their environment. The weather was too abnormal, so who knows if there might be a chaotic future. It was dangerous to be pregnant or with a baby if disaster struck. Besides, they were still young, so it was better to wait until their future was more stable. When Mrs. Sun and Mrs. Guo heard this, they didn't try to persuade them anymore and instead busied themselves with cooking. In truth, Mrs. Yao and Mrs. Lu had already prepared quite a lot of ingredients. A giant rooster that weighed about 5 pounds, 2 pounds of streaky pork, 2 pounds of mutton, and a large slab of tofu. Soon, the dishes were ready. Mrs. Guo saw the mutton pieces cut into pieces on the chopping board and looked at Zhou, who was sitting by the fire. You should cook this cumin mutton dish, Zhou, because we usually cook it too gamey and dry. No problem. You can leave it here while I prepare the seasoning. After Zhou finished speaking, she got up and washed her hands. She then proceeds to marinate the mutton with a small amount of salt, scallions, and peanut oil. She then prepared cumin and chili powder. After the chicken and mushroom stew was out of the pot, Zhou began to stir-fry the mutton. As soon as the fragrance wafted out, Gu Zichou ran in and said, I knew it was third sister-in-law cooking. Otherwise, it wouldn't smell so good. Zhou nodded. It's good that you like it. Today is the day of your engagement, so do you want to cook a dish to show your skills? Okay, Then I'll stir-fry the shiitake mushrooms and bok choy. I'm good at that. Gu Ziqiu hesitated for a moment and agreed with a blushing face. Besides, this was one of the reasons why her mother had asked her to come here. It was the custom here, and she could not avoid it. Zhou nodded. After frying the cumin mutton dish, she divided it between 2 plates and brought them to the dining room. Seeing this, Madame Chow smiled. It looks like we will be having a good meal today. Let the ladies deal with the rest while you should quickly sit down and eat. All right. Zhou responded and put a plate on each table for the men and women. Finally, she sat opposite Madame Chow, next to the matchmaker lady. As soon as she sat down, the matchmaker lady immediately sized her up and smiled. You must be manager Zhou from Grassland Taste Restaurant. I didn't expect you to look even prettier up close. I'll take it as you complimenting me. If there's a chance in the future, come to the restaurant for a visit. Zhou smiled and nodded. Oh, you and your lovely offer. If there's a chance in the future, I'll definitely come for a drink, the matchmaker lady said with a smile. At the same time, she was a little curious about Zhou. Whether it was the way she walked or the way she carried herself, she didn't act like a woman. Zhou had the air of an inexperienced girl, and it was a little strange. But she couldn't care less about this and laughed it off. When Madame Chow heard Zhou getting praised, she happily urged them, hurry up and move your chopsticks. The food won't be good if it gets cold. Especially this mutton, it will be a shame if it gets cold. Yes, yes. The in-laws better try this mutton dish too. Shengru's wife rarely cooks now, even in her restaurant, so there aren't many opportunities to taste her cooking. Mrs. Yao smiled and echoed. Well, we'd better try it out then. The groom's mother, Zhang Lisher, chuckled and couldn't wait to try it out. Even the smell of it had already attracted her. After a bite, the lingering fragrance was left on their lips and mouth. There was no gamey taste except for the umami of the mutton, and the meat was so tender that it was simply amazing. She couldn't help but eat 3 more mouthfuls in a go, and there were none left when she reached out to grab more of it. Chapter 227 Engagement 3. On the other side, the men's table was more reserved. Because the 3 men from the Zhang family had all eaten roasted lamb skewers at Grassland Taste Restaurant, they weren't that surprised by the deliciousness. However, they had their eyes on the seasoning of the meat. So after 3 cups of alcohol, Mr. Zhang asked, "In-law, I heard that there are a lot of spices in Shanghe village." That's right. Shengru's restaurant needs it, but it's too expensive to import from afar. Thus, they asked us to plant some in the village. It's a win-win situation. Father Gu nodded happily. In addition to planting 50 acres of spring wheat this year, their family had planted the most chilies and cumin in the village. The Gu family even planted 30 acres of cumin at once as more people were focused on planting chilies. As long as the water level could last until their crops ripened, they could still live in peace, even if there was no harvest for the year's second half. If you're interested, you can try it next year, but it'll depend on how much Qingrui needs, he continued. Gu Qingrui nodded. We can't decide on this now as it depends on the weather conditions. If the weather returns to normal next year, it'll take in all the chilies even if you plant them all over this area. Why do you sound like you want to open a few more restaurants? Second Uncle Gu asked out of curiosity. It depends on the situation. Even if we don't open more restaurants, we can still sell them through river transportation, right? Of course, what he didn't say was that even if he couldn't sell them as raw chilies, he could make them into chili sauce, chili oil, and so on. In other words, it would not be a bad investment, no matter what. That's nice. If you plant it again next year, remember to let us know, and we'll also give it a try. Father Zhang raised his glass and said, "No problem. If you want to plant it, I'll let Big Brother make the trip over." Gu Qingrui raised his glass and promised, "Leave this matter to me." Gu Qingji immediately echoed. He knew that Gu Qingrui was indirectly supporting his sister, so he had to support her too. The meal ended harmoniously, and Zhou also knew that after this engagement, the betrothal gifts would be sent. The betrothal gifts were 20 taels of silver and a set of silver jewelry. The wedding date was set for April 28th, which was less than a month away. It was nearly half a month earlier than the patriarch's eldest son's wedding. After the meal, Zhou and Gu Qingrui returned to town, using the excuse that they had work to do. Seeing that it was still early, the two carried 20 pounds of white noodles, 20 pounds of rice, 5 pounds of beef, and 2 slabs of cured meat, each weighing about 4 pounds, to Gu Zi's house. Gu Zi, who was about to leave with her servant maids, saw them entering with things in their hands. She was stunned for a moment before she smiled. "Thank you for remembering about my moving in. Hurry up and come in." After that, she quickly let the servant maids take the gifts, and then the three went to the main living room. Gu Qingrui sized up the courtyard on the way and said, "You sure have good taste. This courtyard is quite suitable in all aspects." "I think so too, and it's pretty quiet here." Gu Zi nodded. After they entered the living room, she invited them to sit. "There's a lot of space here, so you guys can come over whenever you're free." "Sure. If you need our help too, don't be shy," Gu Qingrui said. "All right, I won't be polite with you if I need help." "Oh, right. Do you guys know where I can hire a female teacher in town?" Gu Zi asked. "Female teacher?" Gu Qingrui was surprised by the question. "I'm not sure about this, but I'll ask around later." "But what kind of person are you looking for? Or rather, what kind of knowledge do you want the children to learn?" Chapter 228 A Hidden Problem. I would prefer a female teacher who specializes in training the girls of prominent families. I would want someone good at music, chess, calligraphy, painting, embroidery, and cooking. The main lesson would be teaching etiquette and virtue. Gu Zi replied. Gu Qingrui immediately understood what she meant. He nodded and said, "All right. I'll ask around later. However, if you want a live-in teacher, I'm afraid the cost will not be low." "I know, but I can't delay my child's education." "Just go ahead and find one." "All right," Gu Qingrui nodded. After that, the three exchanged a few more polite words, and Zhou remembered that she had wanted to return home sooner. They didn't stay for long after that. On the way back, Zhou said, "It seems that it was better for her to move out. At least she doesn't have to deal with the others. To save face, you have to suffer." The public safety in these ancient times can't be compared to that in our modern times. When people discover that she's living alone with her 2 children, she will know how much trouble she will be in then. Of course, it's fine if she wants to use force to solve these problems. Gu Qingrui said. Zhou did not say anything after hearing that. She had lived alone for a few years, so she naturally understood the troubles of doing so. She only hoped Gu Zi could stay strong and establish a good family. Otherwise, she had to return to the village. Sure enough, something happened 5 days later. As Zhou and Gu Qingrui prepared to head home for the evening, Gu Zi's old maid, Aunt Mei, hurried over. "Young master, madam, please save my madam. Tell me what's going on so I can make the arrangements." Gu Qingrui said. Aunt Mei looked around as she hesitated. Seeing this, Zhou knew that she had some concerns. She turned around and said, "Follow me." Gu Qingrui had no choice but to tie the carriage to a crooked tree at the side and enter with them. Finally, the three entered a private room on the second floor. After sitting down, Gu Qingrui said, "Aunt May, tell me what happened." This morning, a matchmaker brought a middle-aged man to the madam's house to propose marriage. After the madam rejected him, she thought that everything would be fine. Who knew that this man brought a few men to the door in the afternoon and forced madam to agree, or they would ruin madam's reputation. Ruin her reputation. Did he say what he was going to do? Gu Qingrui asked in confusion. Bai Jingping had been cracking down on anyone who was unruly. Who would dare to act up at this time? Were they not afraid of being caught? They weren't even being just unruly at this point. This was clearly a threat. He said that the madam was his escaped concubine. Aunt May stammered. His escaped concubine. Auntie May, are you hiding something from us? Zhou Ying asked after being dumbfounded by the answer. "I'm not," Aunt May said, shaking her head. However, her eyes were obviously avoiding her. She wasn't telling the truth. Seeing this, Zhou Ying said sternly, "Hu Zi is a girl of the Gu family. If something happens to her, we will not stand by and do nothing. But we will not rush up and help you if you are hiding something. Indeed, this matter doesn't seem right. You'd better hurry up and explain yourself. Otherwise, we really can't help you." Gu Qingrui echoed. He wasn't stupid, as her words were obviously full of loopholes. He couldn't just blindly follow them, or else the couple would be the ones who suffered. Seeing that they did not believe her, Aunt May became anxious. However, she also knew they weren't easy to fool, so she was so anxious that her forehead was covered in a cold sweat. When Zhou Ying saw this, she knew something was going on, and it wasn't a small matter. She continued persuading her, "Don't try to find excuses to lie to us. Just tell us the truth. Otherwise, how can we help you when we don't know anything?" Chapter 229 The Hidden Story. Aunt May started crying when she heard that. Then, she said while crying, "Ever since the incident at the Gu family in the capital 2 years ago, our madam's life has not been good. She had been poisoned once before, and it was then that I heard it was young Master Qingrui who had cured her of it. Ever since she went back last time, madam's life had worsened. Not long after, her second daughter fell into the water and almost lost her life. Madam was in a terrible state of mind and moved to the manor. She had stayed there for more than a year, and she didn't expect that her husband's new wife would give birth to a son. A month ago, her ex-mother-in-law urged the husband to demote Madam to a concubine. However, if the Madam became a concubine, her 2 young daughters would become daughters to a concubine. This would be bad news once they fell into the hands of the new Madam, therefore, Madam proposed a divorce. However, they were unwilling. In the end, Madam had to give up the manor and 2 shops that her granduncle had given her in the past to escape from the family. But they were still persistent in introducing another man to the Madam, trying to get into being a concubine too. Madam refused and returned here, not expecting that person to still pursue her. Speak clearly. Who is the one who bullied her and who gave birth to a son for that bastard? Gu Qingrui clenched his fists and said. No wonder Gu Zi refused to stay in the village after she came back. It was because of this. She was also a fool. This wouldn't have happened out of the blue if she had explained her situation earlier. It's her ex-mother-in-law and the new madam. Aunt May said. Who is the new madam? What's her status in the capital? How did she get together with your old master? Zhou Ying asked in an unpleasant tone. The new madam is the magistrate's concubine daughter from Kaiyang Prefecture. After a prefecture meeting, she was taken in as a concubine. Ever since she entered the manor, her ex-mother-in-law had suddenly favored her greatly. In the beginning, our master still felt a little guilty about taking in another concubine. But after 3 months, his heart went that way too. The magistrate of the Kaiyang prefecture, Gu Qingrui, had a thoughtful expression on his face. It seemed that this matter was most likely the doing of the eldest prince's faction. What a shameless person. It appeared that they would only be at ease once they had completely ruined the Gu family. Thinking of this, he suddenly remembered that he still had an aunt in the capital. He wondered how she was doing now. However, based on the current situation, she was probably in a worse state than Gu Zi. After that, he stood up and said, go back to the village and report to our eldest uncle. Let's see what he has to say. It'll bring some people over to Big Sister's side. Alright, but the governor's cracking down on violence now. You have to pay attention to your limits. I will. Don't worry. After Gu Qingrui finished speaking, he brought Aunt Mei and Fang Qing to find Li Si. They hired over 10 street punks through him, rushing to Gu Zi's house. By the time they arrived, Gu Zi's coachman was already lying on the ground, unable to get up. The 2 children were also tied to one side. A man was discussing what they should do to Gu Zi while the remaining 6 people gathered around to comment. Seeing this, Gu Qingrui was furious. He had never seen such a lawless person, even more inhumane than thugs. Tie them up, he ordered immediately. At the same time, he rushed out and kicked the man away. He rushed over, grabbed the man by the collar, and slapped him repeatedly until his hands hurt. Then, he dislocated his arms while he was still in a daze. At the same time, the 6 people the man had brought with him were quickly subdued, and the courtyard was suddenly filled with yells and noises. Chapter 230. Tie them up. Gu Zi, whose clothes were disheveled, immediately burst into tears when she saw her brother had brought help. Seeing this, Gu Qingrui waved his hand at Aunt Mei and said, "Hurry up and help your madam into the house." Oh. Aunt Mei immediately went forward to help her up. However, the 2 women did not return to the house directly. Instead, they untied the ropes on the 2 children and brought them into the house together. Do you know who I am? How dare you meddle in my business? You think I won't kill you? The man glared at Gu Qingrui and threatened angrily. Are you an idiot? I've already meddled in this, and you're still asking if I dare to? Gu Qingrui glared at him and went forward to beat him up more. However, the other was also a martial arts expert. He simply did not react in time before, allowing Gu Qingrui to land some blows on him. Now that the man was ready, he naturally wouldn't just stand there and let himself be beaten. However, both of his arms were already dislocated, so he could only rely on his footwork to dodge and find an opportunity to counterattack. Seeing this, Gu Qingrui gave him a close-range attack and focused on the man's lower body. The abuser, who was already in a tight spot, was quickly restrained. Gu Qingrui immediately went behind him and kicked his leg, causing the man to kneel on the ground with a plop. Without the balance of his arms, the upper half of his body fell straight down, and he ate a mouthful of dirt. Gu Qingrui quickly got someone to bring a rope over and tie him up. He then walked to the coachman, and upon seeing that he was still unconscious, he immediately went forward to take his pulse. He didn't expect the coachman to suffer not only serious external injuries but also numerous internal injuries. He carried him to the carriage and let someone take him to the clinic. "Dr. Gu, what should we do next?" Li Si walked over and asked. "Make them face the house and kneel to atone for their sins." Gu Qingrui had just finished speaking when Gu Zi, who had already tidied up, walked out. She said, "There's no need for them to kneel. I'm afraid of them dirtying my courtyard." "Then what do you plan to do? Isn't the governor cracking down on violence? Just hand them over to the authorities. Then let's wait for Uncle, as Ing has already returned to report this." What? You can't let my parents know about this, or else, big sister, if it's an open sore, the pus has to be squeezed out to be cured. No matter how tightly you cover it, there will be a day when it will ooze. We're all upright people, why should we cover up for those bastards? Gu Zi's body stiffened when she heard that. She remembered Mei Jin's hesitant look and knew she had told him everything. Thinking of this, the grievances in her heart have broken through like a crack in a dam. Tears flowed down, and she turned around to run back into the house. Gu Qingrui also knew she was a prideful person, so he did not say anything more. Instead, he ordered his men to tie those hooligans up and throw them into the courtyard. He took a stool and stood guard outside, waiting for the arrival of the patriarch and the others. As for how to deal with it in the end, that would be up to the patriarch. About an hour later, Zhou Ying, the patriarch, and his wife, together with more than 20 young men from the clan, rushed over. When he entered and saw the scene in the courtyard, he was stunned for a moment. The patriarch went forward and asked, "Qingrui, how's your eldest sister?" "She's all right. You guys go in and look for her while I stay here." Gu Qingrui stood up and said, "All right, well go in and take a look." The patriarch nodded and walked in with Mrs. Wang. Zhou Ying walked to Gu Qingrui and said, "The patriarch and the others haven't had dinner yet. You stay here and do your work while I'll go to the restaurant to prepare some food." Chapter 231 Holding the Fort, go on ahead. Prepare a meal for 30 people, well go there directly after making a decision. You won't have to run back and forth then. Gu Qingrui nodded and replied. After sending Zhou Ying off, Gu Qingrui looked at the people in the courtyard and felt that he had to prepare some drinks for them. At this time, he remembered that there was still a servant girl supposedly here, Shi whom he hadn't seen. He quickly turned around, looked around the courtyard, and finally found her unconscious in one of the rooms. He went up and pinched her philtrum to wake her up. When Shi woke up and saw a man in front of her, she was so frightened that she immediately screamed. Seeing this, Gu Qingrui knew that she had been badly frightened. He took a few steps back and said, "Those attackers are already under control. You'd better go and boil some water and greet the guests." After he finished speaking, he turned around and left the room. Just as he went out, he ran into Gu Qingji. Gu Qingji glanced inside and asked, "Are you all right?" "I'm fine. It was just sister's maidservant, Shi who fainted from fright. I pinched her awake." Pinched her awake. Gu Qingji looked like he wanted to say something but stopped himself. He thought to himself that Gu Qingrui sure didn't hesitate to act efficiently, albeit slightly rough. At that moment, Shi who had just regained her senses, walked out. After seeing the apparent pinch marks on her philtrum, she knew she had misunderstood and quickly stepped aside to make way. After Shi left, Gu Qingji asked, "Do you know who the bastard is? He dared break into sister's house and rob her in broad daylight. What a piece of shit." "I don't know. I tied them up and left them to uncle to handle the rest." "Well, just hold the fort." Gu Qingrui shook his head. This wasn't good for Gu Zi's reputation, so the fewer people who knew about it, the better. Gu Qingji didn't ask any more questions and sat with him as they waited for the patriarch's answer. The patriarch and his wife heard the ins and outs of the matter and were furious. Mrs. Wang hugged Hu Zi and cried, "My poor daughter, how did you meet such an animal? How could he give you away? Why didn't you tell us? Otherwise, we wouldn't have let you move out." "That's enough. If that bastard was a good person, would they have divorced?" The patriarch looked at Gu Zi and continued, "Change the names of the two children. In the future, they'll be the Gu family's children and have nothing to do with the Qin family." "I understand, father." Gu Zi nodded, then helped Mrs. Wang up. "Mother, don't cry. I didn't tell you before because I feared you would be worried. You two go take care of the two kids. I'll go outside and deal with those people." The patriarch turned around and walked out after that. "Father, there's someone behind Lin Dong. Don't be rash, just send him to the authorities." Gu Zi reminded her father hurriedly. "Don't worry, I'll see to it," the patriarch said after a pause. When he arrived at the front yard, he saw that everyone was standing guard and had no intention of making a move. He knew that they were waiting for him to deal with the people. To be honest, he didn't know what to do. If he were to be heavy-handed, then it was likely that the clan would be implicated when investigations began. However, it was simply impossible for him to just let them go. But what could they do now? The patriarch walked to the two brothers, Gu Qingji and Gu Qingrui, who were sitting at the side. "What do you think we should do with these people?" "In my opinion, we should just ruin them," Gu Qingji said. "Ruin them? What do you mean?" the patriarch asked in surprise. "Making them eunuchs." The patriarch's mouth twitched. "It's satisfying to hear it, but we can't do that. Otherwise, we won't be able to gain the upper hand when the investigation starts. Sorry for the inconvenience." "Thank you very much." Chapter 232. Sending them to the officials. After the patriarch finished speaking, he looked at Gu Qingrui and asked, "What do you think, Qingrui? I heard that the county needed manpower for paving the road." Gu Qingrui replied. Punishing them in the open wasn't appropriate, so it was better to hand them over to the authorities and then think of a way to do so in private. After hearing this, the patriarch was slightly unwilling to accept his advice. He assumed they were simply used to being on the short end of the stick, which was why Gu Qingrui gave this advice. He didn't think too deeply about it. "Qingrui, reattach his arm for me," he said with a sigh. "All right." Gu Qingrui agreed and walked over, deliberately using brute force to put his arm back in place. "Arg, aw!" Lin Dong screamed twice and fainted. The patriarch snorted coldly and stepped forward to kick his balls. Lin Dong woke up again from the pain. However, the pain was so intense this time that he couldn't even faint. In just a moment, his face was as pale as paper, and large beads of sweat quickly appeared on his forehead. His body was curled up like a shrimp, bending forward greatly. When the 6 other thugs who followed him saw this, they were so scared that their faces turned white and none dared speak up. "All right, take them to the county's officials now. I'll treat everyone to a meal when you all come back." The patriarch nodded in satisfaction. His daughter had suffered so much, and he had no place to vent the anger. Now that they came to his door, how could he swallow this anger and not teach them a good lesson? As for their revenge, an old man like him wasn't afraid of that. Otherwise, he would not be worthy of being a father. The group immediately escorted the hooligans to town. As for Lin Dong, who was in so much pain that he couldn't walk, someone just went forward and dragged him away. This made it even more painful for him, so painful that Lin Dong cried the whole way. But, of course, no one sympathized with him. When they arrived at the county's officials, Gu Qingrui immediately accompanied the patriarch to look for County Mayor Kong and told him about the matter. County Mayor Kong slammed the table when he heard the news. What? Did someone actually cross over counties and towns to kidnap someone? Does he think that our Yunhe County's governance is dead? This commoner pays his respects to County Mayor Kong. One beg of you to seek justice for my daughter. The patriarch kneeled and kowtowed. At the same time, the tears he had been holding back for so long finally flowed. He hated Lin Dong. He hated that heartless bastard and himself for being blind because he had married his daughter to him. However, the Gu family now had neither money nor power, so they could only silently accept it. County Mayor Kong's heart ached at the sight of the elder's tears. It wasn't hard to see that he was a loving father. "Uncle Gu, please get up," he said. 111 Handle this matter impartially. Thank you, Mayor Kong. 111 Send an honest and upright plaque to the county government. Don't. This is what one should do. Just wait for the news. We'll be troubling you then. It's getting late, so I'll be going back now. After Gu Qingrui finished speaking, he cupped his hands and bowed. He helped the patriarch out after saying their goodbyes. County Mayor Kong accompanied them out of the building, then turned around and called for guards to bring those criminals over. The interrogation began immediately. However, as soon as the Gu family left, Lin Dong and the others' attitudes immediately changed. They knew the Gu family wouldn't let them off easily for what they had done. Therefore, they did not dare to mess around while in the hands of the Gu family. However, being with the mayor was different. County Mayor Kong was an official and had no relationship with Gu Zi, so Lin Dong thought they would be fine with their backing. 111 Have to trouble you to find us a doctor first, Lin Dong said directly. Although he was asking for help, his attitude wasn't respectful at all. Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much. Chapter 233 The Death Penalty. County Mayor Kong's eyes turned cold after hearing their tone. It seemed that Lin Dong was indeed arrogant, and it was no wonder he dared to cross prefectures and counties to kidnap others. Thus, he ordered, "Till get a doctor, but the interrogation will continue. Tell me who you are and why you're here to take her away." "We are from the Kaiyang residence. You have no right to question us, so it's best if you quickly send someone to take us back," one of the people beside Lin Dong said. "And you are?" County Mayor Kong turned his head and asked. "Im Sanjing." "Oh. I thought you would address yourself more highly, seeing as you are acting so highly that you don't respect a 7th-rank official," County Mayor Kong remarked wryly. After that, he gave them a faint smile and asked, "Tell me, why are you all acting so indifferent? Or rather, who's your master?" Lin Dong could tell from the mayor's tone that he wasn't happy, so he quickly answered, "Lord Kong, don't waste your time with a servant like him." County Mayor Kong didn't wait for him to finish. He interrupted, "And you are?" Lin Dong paused for a moment. "What? You don't even dare say who you are. Are you a spy, an illegal resident, or a fugitive?" County Mayor Kong asked again. However, he emphasized the word fugitive. When the guards in the cell heard this, they immediately drew their knives and pointed them at them. Lin Dong finally understood that the mayor wasn't about to let them go easily. Therefore, they did not hide anything and revealed their identities, backgrounds, and motives. He believed that the mayor would definitely let them go after hearing it. County Mayor Kong was taken aback. He had never thought that Lord Qin, Gu Zi's husband, would be such a sanctimonious man. To climb up the social ladder and secure his future, he gave his wife away to a servant. That's right, Lin Dong was a servant of the Zhao Manor, and the Zhao Manor was part of the residence's faction. However, his status in the manor was decently high, being the younger brother of Butler Lin. This explains why his attitude was so arrogant and haughty from the start. One could only imagine how smug he would be when he returned to Kaiyang. Then there was the Zhao family's young daughter. Not only did she take away Gu Zi's husband, but she also wanted to humiliate Gu Zi for the rest of her life. What a vicious woman. The next day, after discussing this with Bai Jingping, Lin Dong and his men were sentenced to death by beheading. They did this to intimidate others and send a message that no matter where one came from, one had to abide by the rules here. No one could cross the line. After the patriarch received the news, he brought Gu Zi to the execution ground to watch their execution. On the way back, the patriarch advised, Z, come back to the village. It's not safe to stay in town. It's fine, father. I think the security here is quite good. I'll just live in the town. But, no buts. Wouldn't we need to build another house if I return to the village? I'm thinking of just buying 2 more servants who know martial arts. You've been stubborn since you were a child, and that hasn't improved at all. The patriarch said helplessly. He sighed and continued, you can try. If there's anything, remember to let us know in time. If Qingrui didn't arrive in time for this incident, you would have been, I know. Don't worry. After this incident, I'll be more careful in the future. Alright, this is the last time. If something happens again, you have to come back with me. The patriarch gave in. However, he made up his mind to tell his wife to use the excuse of buying a betrothal gift for his youngest son so that they could live in town for some time. While accompanying them, he would also judge if she could live her life well. Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much. Chapter 234 Explanation 3 days later, the document authorizing Lin Dong and his group's execution arrived at the Kaiyang residence in Yanglan County. When Lord Chen saw the document, he was first surprised, then angry. How dare the Yunhe County act this way? They knew that Lin Dong was our man, but they executed them without even saying a word. Who was executed? Suddenly, a bright and beautiful young woman handed him a bowl of white fungus soup. She was Lord Chen's current wife, Zhao Xiuying. Drink it to soothe your lungs. I wonder when this dust-filled sky will come to an end. Lord Chen directly handed the document to her and said, take a look for yourself. After Zhao Xiuying took it, her face turned pale when she saw the content. How could that be? How could second Uncle Lin be? Hubby, this can't be true, right? It's stamped with the official seal of the county government, so how could it be fake? I heard that Yunhe County carried out a crackdown last year, but I didn't expect it to be true. They sure spared no expense. After Lord Chen finished speaking, he picked up the bowl and slowly drank the white fungus soup. You still have the heart to drink this. You should think about how to explain this news to Uncle Lin. Zhao Xiuying snatched the bowl from him in a huff. What explanation? What can I do since they got caught by the officials? You can't expect me to write a letter condemning County Mayor Kong. No matter what, Lin Dong is still a servant. Do you think he can overtake your position? You country bumpkin, what do you know? Don't forget, my aunt and my younger brother are still living in the residence. If Uncle Lin takes his anger out on them, their lives will be tough. Lord Chen's face immediately darkened when he heard this. He never expected her to call him a country bumpkin. Then what do you want me to do? Apologize to Butler Lin? He asked. Zhao Xiuying's expression froze for a moment, but she still said, just hurry up and do it. Lin Dong died in our hands, and if this news gets out, if you want to do it, go. Don't forget that you were the one who sent Lin Dong out. What do you mean? You used them happily before, but now that something has happened, you don't want to take responsibility. Don't forget that you're still the head of a county here because my father protected you on my account. Otherwise, with your relationship with the Gu family, you'd have gone home and become a farmer. Lord Chen took a deep breath and smiled flatteringly. Ingzi, stop messing around. He's already dead, so it's useless, no matter how much we apologize. I think it's better for you to go to father-in-law and see what he has to say, or find mother-in-law to discuss it. You're coming with me. Zhao Xiuying's anger subsided a little when she saw him give in. I can't. There are a lot of refugees in the county now. If I go with you, who knows what will happen? Lord Chen refused without even thinking. No matter what, he's the mayor of a county. Why did he have to apologize to a servant? He wouldn't go to her house and suffer that kind of anger. Why don't we send someone over to kill Guzi first? Impossible. Why? Do you still have feelings for her? What are you thinking about? Dongyang is the territory of the third prince, and Mayor Kong is his man. If this matter gets out of hand, father-in-laws and my positions will be threatened. Lord Kong. Should we go to him and ask him not to meddle in this matter? We're of the same rank, but I don't have that right. We'll have to discuss this with father-in-law. Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much. Chapter 235 The Refugees' Arrival. Zhao Xiuying glared at him angrily, then snorted coldly and left with the document. She brought their son and the servants back to the main residence. However, they were robbed by refugees on the way and had to give up all their money and food before escaping. After dinner, Zhao Xiuying took the documents to Lord Zhao's study. When Lord Zhao saw her while handling some documents, he turned around and pointed to a stool at the side. Have a seat. I heard that you were robbed on your way back. They're a group of poor peasants who escaped from the wilderness. Father, you have to avenge your daughter. After Zhao Xiuying finished, she described the scene in detail. Even now, she was afraid they wouldn't let her off after taking their money. Lord Zhao sighed. There has been a drought for 2 years in a row, and the land is basically barren now. Refugees are fleeing everywhere, so we won't find anyone even if one send people to look for them. Just treat it as losing money to avoid a worse disaster. By the way, why did you bring your child back in such a chaotic time? Oh, that's right, one came over because I have something for you. Zhao Xiuying handed the document to Lord Zhao. After reading it, Lord Zhao's expression was hideous. Father, Zhao Xiuying said immediately, this Mayor Kong is sure making things ugly. We shouldn't let him off so easily. You know nothing. Lord Zhao snapped. If he were to make things difficult for another government official just because of a servant, his position in the government would be over. However, it was pretty embarrassing that this happened. He knew he couldn't openly do something about this, but that was different if he did it in the dark. Thinking of this, his eyes flickered as he smiled. Father. Zhao Xiuying looked at his malicious smile and couldn't help but shiver. Do this. Lord Zhao waved at her and whispered a few words into her ear. Remember to do it in private. Don't give anyone anything they can use against you, he reminded her. Zhao Xiuying's eyes lit up at the great idea. Not only could this vent their anger, but they would also solve the problem of the refugees. It was akin to killing 2 birds with 1 stone. She nodded and said, I'll remember that. I'll go back and implement it tomorrow. Okay, I'll arrange for someone to send you back tomorrow. Remember, it won't be peaceful in the future, so don't go out alone. I will remember that. Well then, I will take my leave. Zhao Xiuying left the study after she said goodbye to her father. The following day, the Zhao family's guards escorted her home. Half a month later, many refugees arrived in Yunhe County, causing more chaos. However, it was quickly suppressed by the soldiers. County Mayor Kong had to call on large families to open their warehouses and provide porridge to calm the refugees. When Zhou Ying saw this, she asked Sun Hongliang to follow the wealthy families in the town and build a shed outside the town. However, what she gave was not porridge but a soup with some flour dumplings. She added a little meat, oil, and vegetables, which the refugees loved. At noon, Zhou Ying went to the cloth shop and picked 2 sets of fine cotton clothes for Gu Ziqiu as a congratulatory gift. When she returned, she saw Chang Shun waiting in the restaurant. Uncle Chang, why are you here? Did something happen in the manor? That's right. There were thieves in the village last night. Although they were discovered in time, many white potato vines were still ruined. Chang Shun stood up and spoke with a pained expression. Those were the sweet potatoes that they had painstakingly preserved. Just like that, these thieves had ruined nearly an acre of land. It really made them furious. After Zhou Ying heard this, she thought of the groups of refugees outside, and her face suddenly darkened. She asked, "Did you catch anyone?" "Sorry for the inconvenience." "Thank you very much." Chapter 236 Bait, yes. The patrol team caught 10 refugees. 3 of them fell into a trap and were injured, so 1 a.m. here to ask you what we should do with these people. Chang Shun nodded. Patrol team. Yes, ever since the refugees came, I was afraid thieves might appear, so I discussed it with Uncle Nian and set up a patrol team. Well done. Sit down, drink some water, eat some snacks, and take a rest. 111 Go to the clinic for some medicine. After Zhou Ying finished speaking, she turned around and went to the clinic. It just so happened that Gu Qingrui was also there. After Zhou Ying explained the situation to him, they got into a carriage and brought Chang Shun back to the manor. When they arrived at the manor, Gu Qingrui and Zhou Ying first went to see the 3 injured people. Although the 3 thieves were dirty, they looked quite muscular and didn't look like refugees. Therefore, Gu Qingrui didn't go forward to treat their wounds. Instead, he asked, "Who are you people? Can't you tell from our clothes?" "We're refugees," the eldest one in the middle replied. The arrogance in his eyes made him look even less like a refugee. Gu Qingrui became lazy in questioning them further after seeing this. Instead, he went forward to check their hands and asked, "How can a person who has been holding a knife for years be a refugee? Don't tell me you're a butcher. It doesn't matter if you don't want to say it. Your wounds will remain like this." One think that in this situation, even the government wouldn't care about the deaths of a few people. Not to mention a person who is so poor that he couldn't afford a doctor and died of infection. I wonder if you can bear the torture of being eaten alive by maggots. When Gu Qingrui said this, he deliberately fanned the flies around his wound. He stood back up and continued, "Tsk, it makes my hair stand on end just thinking about it. Do you want some red sugar?" Flies and ants love sugar. Zhou Ying agreed. No need. It's more painful to cut flesh with a blunt knife. It's boring to finish him quickly. Gu Qingrui shook his head. He said to the 2 guards, "You guys keep an eye on them. Remember to let them have 2 bowls of porridge a day. Don't let them starve to death. Master, mistress, don't worry. We won't let them die." Gu Qingrui nodded and went with Zhou Ying to look at the dozen or so refugees who had been caught. These people looked like genuine refugees. Not only were they dirty, but they were also so thin and frail that they looked like they were just skin and bones. They were all wailing and shouting for food. "If you want to eat, you can have as many steamed buns as you want, but you have to clarify why you came to the village to ruin our food. Did you come on your own, or who sent you? In short, whoever tells us the secret will be given a steamed bun. Otherwise, you can atone for the food you've ruined." Zhou Ying said. "Mistress, I'll order someone to steam some buns." Chang Shun immediately said. "Go on, but just steam 10 buns. Since they dared waste food and have no remorse, it's not worth the sympathy." Zhou Ying waved her hand. Chang Ying immediately ran out. The refugees panicked when they heard this. Starving men like them could finish 10 buns in one meal, which meant the 10 buns would only be shared with 2 other people. One by one, they immediately fought to be the first to shout. Some people even started to fight, and it was a mess. Gu Qingrui watched the commotion from the side. Since the refugees didn't have any weapons in their hands anyway, no one would die. When they were tired, he said, "Aren't you guys stupid? If you had the time to fight, why don't any of you shout it out? Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much." Chapter 237 Questioning. Didn't you guys capture the three? We were urged to come here by them. Yes, yes. We followed them all the way here. We were planning to go south, but the three told us that Yunhe County had many mountains and rivers, so they told us to come here. As one spoke, all the refugees started talking simultaneously, and their voices were getting louder and louder. In the end, it was a mess. Gu Qingrui had no choice but to raise his hand and shout. "That's enough. All of you, shut up. Speak one by one. Then how are we going to split the buns? There are always more buns. Well, give one to anyone as long as their information is useful." Gu Qingrui asked, "Who was the one who said that you all were originally planning to go south, but those three people said here has many rivers and mountains and told you guys to come here instead?" Someone immediately raised his hand and said, I said it." "Very good. Stand to the side. The one who spoke first, go stand over there as well." Gu Qingrui pointed to the wall on their left after he finished speaking. As soon as he said that, the two people left the group. Gu Qingrui continued, "Wait, and I'll ask you all one by one. Whoever I ask must answer. So, you guys have to prepare what you want to say." After that, he took out a piece of paper and a quill from his first aid box. He wrote down the names of the two people and what they said. Then he asked the refugees one by one. However, the rest of the information was useless to him. In conclusion, he gathered two pieces of information. First, those three and their accomplices incited all the refugees who came to Yunhe County. They were here from Yanling County's Kaiyang residence. Secondly, they had come to the manor to steal tonight because of the same three people's instigation. As the group of 20 or so refugees went to destroy the wild vegetables, the three people had gone to steal cattle and sheep. This was also the reason why they had fallen into the trap. After Gu Qingrui was done tidying up, he immediately thought of someone. If he remembered correctly, Gu Zi's ex-husband was the mayor of Yanling County. Could it be that he had deliberately incited these refugees to come here? This matter had to be clearly investigated. He turned to Zhou Ying. "Ying, tell Chang Shun to steam more buns. The two people in front will each get 10 white flour buns, while the others will each get 10 black flour buns. It'll go over while you can take a look at the cattle and sheep pens." Zhou Ying responded and turned to go out. Gu Qingrui nodded. He packed his things and followed her. "Don't go. When are you going to let us go?" Seeing that they were about to leave, someone immediately asked. "When it's time to release you, I'll do so." Zhou Ying replied and ignored them. After settling the matters of the manor, Gu Qingrui gave Chang Shun a few bags of muscle relaxant powder. If it gets hard to look after them, provide them with these muscle relaxants. Remember not to let them escape. Especially those three who are injured, don't let them die. How long should we lock them up for? Latest until tomorrow night. In addition, have someone set up some more traps in case someone comes to attack at night. Understood. I'll have someone make the arrangements in a moment. After they left the manor, Gu Qingrui turned his head and said to Zhou Ying, "Babe, one have to go to the county to find County Mayor Kong, and I will come back tonight. You should rest in the restaurant and not go home." Zhou Ying knew he would complain about this and immediately nodded. "All right, be careful. Sorry for the inconvenience." "Thank you very much." Chapter 238 The Worsening Drought. 1. Mistress, you're back. One have something to tell you. When Sun Hongliang saw Zhou Ying enter, he walked out from behind the counter. Then let's go to the back. Zhou Ying nodded and led him to the back. After sitting in the central room, she poured herself a glass of water and asked, "Tell me, what's the matter?" When I was taking water, I realized that the water level in the well had dropped again. Zhou Ying's hand that was holding the cup immediately froze. She asked, "How much has it dropped this time?" "About half a meter. It's probably because we've been using too much water recently. The porridge stand alone needs about 20 buckets of water daily. It's because it hasn't rained for too long, causing the water level to drop." With a sigh, Zhou Ying said. There was a snowfall after the new year. She thought it would be better this year, but it turned out worse. She was still determining if the spring wheat would ripen this year. Then, Zhou Ying paused for a moment before replying, "Even so, we can't stop providing porridge. Otherwise, those refugees will tear down our restaurant. Let's try to save as much as possible. As for the future, right now, everyone is in the same boat. There will be others who can't continue this charity before us, so there's no need to be the first to step out." "Oh, right. How much food is left in the warehouse?" "About 2,000 pounds of rice and less than 5,000 pounds of black flour. Increase oil and water in the porridge stands. The beef oil and mutton stored in the ice cellar can be put in. Also, put in dried vegetables to save as much grain as possible. This year's situation isn't optimistic, so we must plan early." "I understand. Please rest while one carry that out." Sun Hongliang responded and got up. Zhou Ying couldn't sit still after drinking a glass of water. She immediately went to the well and tied a rope to a clean stone to measure the depth. She didn't expect the water to be less than 2 meters deep. Their well was a well-known deep well in town. What about the other wells if the water in this one was almost at the bottom? She carried the stone out of the restaurant and wanted to find a public well to test. However, when she arrived, she discovered that she did not need to run a test. Beside the well, there was a long line of people waiting for water. After asking around, she found out that the water in the well had reached the bottom. It was already decent if they could wait for 1 or 2 buckets of water per day. Zhou Ying found 2 more wells, and the general situation was similar. "Manager Zhou, what are you doing walking around the street with that stone?" Zhou Ying looked toward the source of the voice and saw Manager Qian driving a carriage. He pulled a carriage full of things and parked it on the side, with another carriage following behind. "Uncle Qian, you're not thinking of leaving, are you?" she asked. "I am. The drought is worsening, and business isn't going well. In addition to the large influx of refugees, the water supply is the main problem. We thought of heading south to seek refuge with my wife and sister. What about you guys? What are your plans? Do you want to go together?" Manager Qian asked. "We have a big family, and there are still crops in the fields. We can't just move them as we please. Let's wait until the summer harvest is over." "That's true. We'll be leaving now. See you again. I wish you all the best." Zhou Ying waved her hand. After they left, Zhou Ying didn't bother to check anymore and went back to the restaurant. On the other side, Gu Qingrui drove the carriage to the county government office and found Mayor Kong. He told him about the 3 people situation and said, "I'm sorry, Mayor Kong. I'm afraid I've implicated you because of my sister's matter. Sorry for the inconvenience." "Thank you very much." Chapter 239 The Worsening Drought. 2. You're being too polite. Even if that incident didn't happen, there would still be refugees coming here. It's just a matter of time. Mayor Kong said as he helped him up. But to be honest, the drought is getting worryingly serious, he continued. Many wealthy families in the county have decided to take refuge in the south. The following days are really not going to be easy, you guys have to be careful. We will. Then, do you want to handle those people, or should we do as we see fit? How about this? You go back and keep an eye on them first. Tonight, one will discuss this with the other officials in the county. No matter the result, I will give you a definite answer tomorrow. Alright, sorry to trouble you. Gu Qingrui took 2 small porcelain bottles from the first aid box and handed them to him. One bottle is to relieve fatigue, and the other is to prevent heat stroke. Keep it, just in case. Thank you. County Mayor Kong took it with a smile. After that, he gave Gu Qingrui a few more instructions. Gu Qingrui responded and left the county government office. After he came out, he detoured to the market to purchase some medicinal herbs. When he passed by the bank on his way back, he realized that many people were going in and out. He went up to ask around and discovered that many people were exchanging silver or banknotes. He also heard that many people were planning to head south. Further ahead, many others lined up in the grain store. However, they were now selling in limited quantities, and each household could only buy 5 pounds of grain daily. He also saw that the cloth shop was selling at a 30% discount. Thus, he went in and bought 20 batches of fine cotton cloth, 3 batches of silk cloth, and several needles and thread. He put all of them in his carriage and left. When he was about to leave town, they heard someone shout, "Leather is selling at half price. Half-price leather, don't miss it if you pass by. There won't be such a deal after this shop." Gu Qingrui walked over and took a look at the leather. It was mostly sheepskin and rabbit skins, so he immediately lost interest. There were many of these things in the interspace. When the shop assistant noticed he was about to leave, he stepped forward and smiled. "Please don't leave, sir. What kind of leather do you want? We have a lot of them in our shop. You'll definitely be satisfied with them. You're selling in a hurry. Are you closing shop?" Gu Qingrui stopped and asked. "Yeah, business isn't doing well now. The boss wants to go south, so, I understand. Do you have any good leather here?" "Good leather. What kind of leather do you want? Take a look around to find anything you need." "Mink and fox fur." The shop assistant knew Gu Qingrui was rich and nodded in joy. "We don't have mink fur because it's too valuable and is usually taken away by high officials and nobles. However, we have 4 red fox furs here. It's good to make a cloak with them. Do you want to take a look?" "Sure, but I have a carriage that needs to be tended, so one won't be going in. Help me take it out. Please wait a moment." After the assistant finished speaking, he turned around and ran into the shop. After a while, he ran out with 2 pieces of fur skin, followed by a middle-aged man, who was also holding another 2 pieces. Gu Qingrui looked at the furs and saw they were the hides of an adult fox. The fur was smooth and beautiful and looked complete. It looked lovely at first glance. "How much are these?" "If it's appropriate, 111 take it all," Gu Qingrui said. "I went details, no bargaining," the middle-aged man said. At the same time, the shop assistant opened his mouth but swallowed the words that were about to come out. However, from his disdainful expression, it was not difficult to tell that the price of the furs was too high. Seeing this, Gu Qingrui returned them to the middle-aged man. "You should keep it for yourself then. It's more expensive compared to usual. Sorry for the inconvenience." "Thank you very much." Chapter 240 Invitation, please don't leave. We can discuss the price. The middle-aged man quickly smiled and persuaded, if you're sincere about selling them, give me an honest price. Otherwise, forget it. It's more worthwhile to buy food back in this drought. Look at what you're saying. These are really good products that aren't easily encountered. How about this, 15 taels? You can take all 15 taels. 10 taels. Load it up if you want to sell it. If not, I'll leave town. Gu Qingrui turned his horse around after he finished speaking. You're too ruthless in your bargaining. How about we each take a step back and add 3 taels? Seeing this, Gu Qingrui did not say anything and just pulled the reins, about to set off. Fine, give me the silvers. Seeing this, the man gritted his teeth and sold the furs. At least he could recover his costs. Gu Qingrui handed the silver to him and then asked the shop assistant to load the furs into his carriage. After the middle-aged man left, Gu Qingrui asked, Young man, are you going to lose your job soon? Exactly. After I'm done with these hides, I should be going home. If you find it convenient, you can go to Qingshui Town's Grassland Taste Restaurant to get a job. Gu Qingrui offered with a smile, leaving the stunned assistant behind. He just saw that this kid was quite clever and honest. If properly trained, he would be a rare talent. When he returned to the restaurant, the sky had already turned completely dark. After getting someone to help move the things into the restaurant, he took out 10 batches of fine cotton cloth and handed it to Mrs. Li, asking her to make everyone summer clothes. He put the rest in the main living room and then took his herbs to his clinic. After entering, he thought of the 3 injured captured men and decided to interrogate them. The 3 people who were locked up had been bothered by flies for the entire afternoon. The blood on their wounds especially attracted flies, and they were gradually swelling. The men had also started to develop a fever. When they saw Gu Qingrui, they immediately thought of his previous remarks. The men feared their lives would be gone if Gu Qingrui didn't treat them in time. Therefore, the man in the middle asked directly, What do you want to know? You thought about it? Gu Qingrui stepped forward and asked. Yes, but you have to promise us that you'll treat our wounds as soon as possible. No problem, I'm a doctor. After Gu Qingrui said this, he stepped forward to check their wounds. Tisk, tsk. The weather is sure hot. It hasn't even been 6 hours, and the wound has already started to rot. The 3 of them tensed up when they heard that. The other 2 immediately followed suit and shouted, Just ask what you want to know. Who are you? Who told you to bring refugees to Yunhe County? What other missions do you have here? One person, one question. Gu Shengrui's expression hardened. The 3 looked at each other for a moment before the one in the middle laughed dryly. What are you talking about? We don't understand, and we're just refugees. As for choosing this place, it's natural because there are mountains and water here. What's so strange about that? Is that so? Alright, then, you'll have to bear with your wounds. Yunhe County's punishment for thieves is quite severe, so I don't think there's a need to treat you. Gu Qingrui turned around and walked out after he finished speaking. Hiss, at that moment, the person on the right gasped. He felt something stirring in the wound on his leg. The pain was so intense that he broke out in a cold sweat. Thinking back to the scene of Gu Qingrui being eaten by maggots, he sweated profusely on such a hot day and quickly shouted, Don't go, they'll talk. Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much. Chapter 241. The rats helped Gu Qingrui paused, but he did not turn around. He knew well that they would not speak unless they felt the pain. At the thought of this, he went straight back to his room to sleep. The man in the middle immediately rebuked, All right, he's already gone, so stop shouting. However, you have to think about it carefully. Our family members are still in Yarding County. If the news is leaked and Madam finds out about it, our family members will be in danger. Indeed. Don't listen to his nonsense. He wouldn't dare to kill anyone. Otherwise, they wouldn't have sent Butler Lynn's brother to the county government. The man on the left replied. Shut up, all of you. There's a bug in my wound, and it's burrowing into my flesh. The man on the right screamed. His sweat kept falling like rain. The other two immediately felt their blood run cold and turned to look down at his wound. Although they didn't see the bug he mentioned, they could tell from the convulsing muscles near the wound that he was really in great pain. The two looked at each other and understood that Gu Shengro's previous words weren't without basis. If the wound wasn't treated, not only would it attract flies, but it might also attract insects. However, the two of them were firmly tied to the pillars, which meant they couldn't help. They began to try to free themselves from the ropes. However, the people in the village followed old ways of slaughtering cows and sheep daily, so they were best at tying something or someone up. The two men struggled for a long time and were covered in sweat, but the rope did not loosen and became tighter. They had to stop and wait for Gu Qingrui to arrive. However, they did not see Gu Qingrui. Instead, they were met with rats. When they realized that the rat was trying to bite their wounds, their faces changed into ones of panic and fear. The rats were dirty, and they might spread diseases if they bit into their wounds. After that, the three screamed and kicked, but it was all meaningless. The rats still climbed up their wounds. Arg! The man in the middle was the first to be bitten. He looked at the 10 or so rats of different sizes scurrying around on the ground and didn't care about his master or family anymore. Help! Well, talk. Well, tell you everything. Hurry up and call the doctor. He shouted in panic. As soon as he opened his mouth, the other two on his left and right didn't hesitate and immediately followed his shouts. Their screams were so loud that they circled the sky 3 times, waking up those who were light asleep. Of course, it woke up 2 guards napping outside. When they heard the noise inside, they looked at each other and immediately rushed in. They were shocked to see rats biting them, so they immediately ran over and began to drive the rats away with a stick. In the end, the rats were gone, but the 3 men were still bitten and whacked with the sticks until they fainted from the pain. The 2 guards looked at each other and left one to guard against the rats while the other quickly ran to find Gu Qingrui. When Gu Qingrui heard that rats had bitten them, he knew he could no longer delay treating their wounds. He immediately got up, took his first aid kit, and went to the small hut where they were held. When he saw the 3 unconscious people, he immediately took out a small bottle of his disinfectant from the first aid kit and began disinfecting them. After treating their wounds, he sprinkled some light salt water on them with a wicked smile. Sorry for the inconvenience. Thank you very much. You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.